I never intended to find out the truth. I didn't want to. If I'm being honest, part of me would have rather stayed in the dark, comfortable in the life I thought I had. But life doesn't ask for permission before dropping a bombshell on you. And that's exactly what happened. I had just returned from a late meeting at work. It had been a long day. When I stepped through the door of our apartment, I expected nothing more than a quiet evening. Rachel was already home, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in, but that was nothing new. At first, I thought it was just her usual way of unwinding after a long day, nothing more. She used to greet me at the door, but lately, I'd become just another part of the furniture. It was strange the way things had changed. Not that long ago, we'd spent hours talking about everything. Our plans, our dreams, the future. Now, there was this constant undercurrent of silence, like something was always hanging in the air, but neither of us was brave enough to address it. That night, though, something was different. It was subtle at first, a change I couldn't put my finger on. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and when I returned, Rachel was no longer on the couch. The apartment was eerily quiet. I looked around, expecting to find her in the bathroom or maybe in the bedroom, but nothing. It was odd. But what really made me pause was the faint sound of her voice, muffled through the walls. Was she on the phone? I couldn't make out the words, but I could tell it wasn't a casual conversation. It sounded intimate. I stood still for a moment, trying to listen closer, but the sound abruptly stopped. Just as quickly as it had started, it vanished. I chalked it up to my tired mind playing tricks on me. But then the thought crossed my mind, a question that I hadn't allowed myself to ask before. What if? I know it sounds paranoid. I know it sounds like I was just overthinking things. But that's when I decided to check something. Just something small, nothing too invasive, just a check. Rachel's phone. Before you judge me, let me explain. I wasn't the type of guy to snoop around. I wasn't the jealous type. I trusted her, and I trusted us. But there was a feeling in the pit of my stomach, something I couldn't shake off. A nagging sense that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't seeing the whole picture. I told myself I wouldn't look at it. I even put the phone back down once, walking away, trying to convince myself that I didn't need to know. But then, I did it. I grabbed her phone, unlocked it without thinking twice, and swiped through her messages. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, that there was nothing there. But the moment my eyes landed on the screen, I felt my heart drop. It was just a simple message. Nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. But it wasn't the message itself, it was the name attached to it. Liam. I had heard that name before, but not in the context I was seeing it now. Liam was her coworker, someone I knew only by name. He had always been nice, but never someone I thought much of. However, after seeing that message, I started remembering things. Things I had overlooked. The late nights she would come home, too tired to talk. The quiet phone calls she'd have in the other room. The secretive smile when she spoke about him. Always a little too quick, a little too rehearsed. I opened the message. It was brief, but clear. Liam, I miss you. I can't stop thinking about you. For a moment, I felt like I was suspended in time. The room grew cold. The blood drained from my face. I didn't know what to do, what to think. My mind was racing, but there was this strange clarity beneath it all. I hadn't been imagining things. She was hiding something from me, something big. But what did this mean? Did she love him? Had she been lying to me for months? Or was this something more recent? I scrolled through more messages, each one more revealing than the last. Flirty, intimate exchanges, plans to meet, cryptic messages about things they had done together, and words I never thought would come from my wife to anyone other than me. I wanted to feel anger. I wanted to storm in there and confront her, demand answers. But instead, I felt numb. I put the phone down on the counter and walked out onto the balcony, staring out into the night. I could hear Rachel moving around in the other room, probably getting ready for bed, oblivious to what I had just discovered. I could have confronted her right then. I could have yelled, thrown the phone at her, and asked her why. But something stopped me. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't a lack of courage. No, it was something deeper. It was the realization that I had a choice now, a choice I hadn't had before. I could face the truth, this harsh, ugly truth, or I could take control. I didn't know yet how I would handle it. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her think she was getting away with it. Not without consequences. And for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. The silence between us that night was suffocating. Rachel was getting ready for bed, humming softly in the other room, unaware that everything had just changed. I stayed on the balcony, staring at the dark sky, trying to piece everything together. My mind was spinning in a dozen directions, but one thought kept coming back. Why? I wasn't a naive guy, but I was a trusting one. For years, I had never questioned Rachel. We were solid, or so I thought. We had built a life together, a future, a story that felt written in stone. But now, I wasn't sure of anything. I wanted answers, but I wasn't going to get them by barging in and confronting her. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I had to play this carefully. I spent the next few days like a man on a mission. I wasn't going to let my emotions cloud my judgment. No, I would observe. Watch her. I would find the truth, but I wouldn't let her know I was onto her just yet. I'd been living in the shadows long enough. This time, I was going to be the one pulling the strings. Rachel's behavior over the next few days only confirmed my suspicions. She was distant. Her phone was practically glued to her hand, but she always made sure I couldn't see the screen. She would glance at me occasionally, as if trying to gauge how much I knew, but she never said anything directly. And the little moments that once felt like small quirks, things I'd brushed off before, began to stand out in sharp relief. She was careful, too careful, and that, in itself, was a red flag. She had no idea that I had already seen the truth in her phone. That message from Liam, it was just the beginning. I couldn't let it go. I had to know everything. So, I did something I never thought I would. I started snooping, not in some desperate, frantic way, but in a calculated manner. When she went out for groceries one afternoon, I went into her drawer, where I knew she kept her journal. I had never been the kind of guy to invade her personal space, but in that moment, something in me snapped. I opened the journal, and what I found made my blood run cold. She had been writing about Liam for weeks. Pages and pages of entries, detailing their meetings, their secret exchanges. It was like reading a love letter to someone I didn't even know. She had confessed things in that journal, things I never imagined she'd say, things I didn't even want to know. I can't stop thinking about him. Every time we're together, it feels like everything else disappears. I can't breathe when he's not around. He makes me feel alive in a way I can't explain. Reading those words felt like a knife to the chest. I had seen the signs, but this was confirmation. She didn't just have a crush on him. She was in love with him. And it was the most gut-wrenching thing I had ever read. But I wasn't about to let her know that I knew. Not yet. I had already decided that I wasn't going to be the guy who begged, who pleaded for answers. I wasn't going to let her have that kind of power over me. If she wanted a choice, she would get it. The next morning, I was calm, collected, acting as if nothing had changed. I made coffee like I always did, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited for Rachel to join me. When she finally came in, looking tired, I gave her a warm smile, the kind of smile I'd always given her. It was hard, but I kept my cool. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did you sleep okay?" She smiled back, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Yeah, fine. Just tired." I nodded. "I get that. Long week." She didn't seem to notice the distance that had crept into my voice. I didn't want her to. I was in control, and I was going to stay that way. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing I had figured everything out. I didn't want her to see the pain behind my eyes, so I hid it behind a mask of indifference. But I could feel it bubbling inside me. I had been patient long enough. The next step was clear. I needed to confront her, but not head-on. No, I had a different plan in mind. That evening, I suggested we go for a walk, something simple. I knew she liked to get fresh air in the evening, and I knew she'd agree. We walked side by side, but the silence between us felt heavier than ever. The words I needed to say, the ones I had been holding in for days, were on the tip of my tongue. And then, as we walked, I did it. I dropped the first hint. "So, I found something interesting today," I said casually, looking ahead. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" I didn't look at her. "Just a journal entry. You know, the kind where people write about their feelings. It's funny what you can learn when you stop looking at things only from one perspective." Her pace slowed for a moment, and I could feel her tension rise. "What did you read?" I finally turned to look at her. The look in her eyes, those eyes I had always trusted, were filled with confusion. But there was something else there too. Fear. She was worried. "I think you know what I mean," I said, voice steady, not giving her an inch. "I hope you're ready to tell me the truth, Rachel." And just like that, The game had begun. Her face went pale the moment I said those words. It was only for a split second, but it was enough for me to see. She was caught. She didn't think I knew. Not yet. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the panic in her eyes as she quickly tried to compose herself. But it was too late. She wasn't fooling me anymore. We were still walking, our steps echoing on the pavement, but the air between us had shifted. I felt like I could reach out and touch the tension. I had dropped the bomb, and now we were both walking through the aftermath. Rachel was silent, her lips pressed tightly together. It was like she was trying to find the right words, but couldn't. Her breathing had become shallow, and I could feel the weight of her guilt in every step she took. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't need to hear an explanation right away. I knew that if I pushed her too hard, she'd shut down. I needed to give her room to crack, to let her own guilt tear down the walls she'd so carefully constructed. But I also needed to make her realize that the game had changed. She wasn't in control anymore. We walked for a few minutes in silence, my mind racing with thoughts, trying to anticipate her next move. The streets were quiet, the city humdrum of noise muted by the intensity of the moment. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was shaky, fragile. "Adrian, what are you talking about?" I kept my pace slow, almost casual, as if I were walking to a coffee shop instead of having the most important conversation of my life. "You know exactly what I mean," I said, glancing at her from the corner of my eye. "You don't need to pretend like I'm out of the loop." She stumbled over her words, trying to find something, anything, to latch onto, but I wasn't going to let her divert the conversation. "Adrian, Don't play dumb, Rachel," I interrupted, my voice low but firm. "I saw the messages. I read your journal. I know everything." Her face twisted, like she was trying to process what I had just said. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought she might cry, or maybe yell. But she didn't. She just stared at me, frozen in place as if she couldn't believe the very words coming out of my mouth. I stopped walking. We were standing on a quiet street corner, the dim streetlights casting a soft glow on the sidewalk. I turned to face her completely, my eyes searching hers, watching the panic slowly turn to anger. She crossed her arms defensively, a barrier she had learned to use over the years. But this time, it wasn't working. She wasn't going to hide behind her usual charm or clever words. I had already seen through her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said at last, her voice tinged with disbelief. But there was a sharpness to it. The way she was trying to turn the situation back on me. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was trying to think of a way out. But there was no escape. "Really?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because I found more than just a few messages, Rachel. I found an entire chapter of your life that you've been hiding from me. A life that includes Liam." The name hung in the air like a challenge. Her face shifted again, this time to something unreadable, like a mask slipping into place. She was hiding her emotions now, shutting them down behind a wall I had never seen before. But it was too late for that. I had already crossed the line. I knew what she was capable of, and she knew what I had just uncovered. She looked at me, her eyes darting around, like she was searching for a way out. But there was no way out of this one. She took a deep breath and opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, cutting her off before she could say anything. "You don't have to say anything right now," I said, my tone steady, almost calm. "I don't need your excuses. What I need is the truth." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she just stared at me, her expression shifting from guilt to defiance. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she spoke again, her voice quieter now, as though she were conceding something. "Adrian," she said softly, almost like she was trying to soften the blow. "I never meant for you to find out this way." She took a hesitant step forward, her hands wringing together. "But you have to understand this. This isn't what you think. Liam, it's complicated." I shook my head, disbelief creeping into my chest. "Complicated? How much more complicated can it be when you've been lying to me for months, keeping secrets behind my back? What exactly is so complicated about cheating?" Her eyes flashed with something: hurt, regret, but there was also anger there. Anger that I had dared to pull the curtain back. "You don't understand," she said through clenched teeth. "I didn't want this to happen. It just did. It's not black and white, Adrian." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "So what? You've been seeing him behind my back, hiding it from me, and now you want me to understand?" You think I'm the one who doesn't get it? I felt the tightness in my chest, the frustration building. I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to let her see me fall apart. But hearing her explain it like it was some sort of complicated love story made my blood boil. You're right, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It's not black and white, but it doesn't mean it's over. We can fix this, Adrian. We can work through it. I stared at her, feeling something cold settle over me. I repeated slowly. We can fix this? No, Rachel. You can fix this. You've made your choice. And I think you know as well as I do that I'm not going to be the one you come crawling back to. She took a step forward, reaching out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. She seemed taken aback by the movement, but I wasn't going to let her get too close. Not now. Adrian, please. I held up my hand. No, Rachel. I think you've said enough. I turned and walked away, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. I had made my decision, and I was done. The game had changed, and Rachel wasn't going to get to decide how it ended. I would. I didn't go home that night. I didn't want to. I couldn't face her again, not after what she had admitted. It was easier, in some strange way, to be out there in the streets, lost in the chaos of the world, than to return to the place that now felt like a prison. A place that had once been filled with laughter and love, but now felt cold, empty, and hollow. I didn't need to make any grand decisions yet. I knew Rachel was back at the apartment, sitting in the silence I had left behind. She would be replaying everything in her mind, wondering what went wrong, and probably regretting the choices she had made. I didn't care, though. She had had plenty of time to think about this, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much I was hurting. The ball was in my court now. I was done being the guy who always accepted the scraps. The more I walked, the more my mind churned. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened pulling me down, but I wasn't going to break. Not this time. I had always been the one who tried to fix things, always tried to save whatever was left. But now, I wasn't going to be that person. I was going to stand my ground, even if it hurt. I found myself outside a bar, the neon lights flickering overhead. I didn't even think about it. I just walked in, ordered a drink, and sat at the bar. I wasn't here for anything in particular. I wasn't looking for solace, or to escape my problems. I just needed something to numb the ache in my chest, something to stop the thoughts from spinning in my head. The bartender handed me a glass of whiskey, and I took a long sip, feeling the warmth spread through me. I had always hated the idea of drowning my sorrows in alcohol, but tonight was different. Tonight, the rules didn't matter. Rachel didn't deserve me, and I wasn't about to waste another second of my life trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. I glanced around the room, but my focus shifted when I noticed a man sitting at the end of the bar, watching me. He wasn't looking at me with pity, like I expected people would. No, his gaze was sharp, calculated. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. He had a confidence that I envied, and it made me wonder what it would be like to be that detached, to not care about the things that bound me to people, to relationships, to memories. He leaned toward me, his voice low but clear. You okay? I didn't know why I answered. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, or maybe it was the fact that I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of Rachel in days. No, I said flatly. Not really. He gave a small, knowing smile and nodded, as if he understood more than he should have. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. He paused. You want to talk about it? I looked at him, trying to gauge whether this guy was just a random stranger or someone who had seen his share of broken hearts. Maybe he was both. What's there to talk about? I asked, my voice more bitter than I meant it to be. I've just been living a lie. He didn't flinch at my words. Instead, he shrugged casually, like it wasn't the first time he had heard them. Yeah, I get it, he said, his tone strangely detached. It's like a bad movie you're stuck in, and you don't know how to get out. I scoffed. A bad movie? This feels more like a horror show. The guy chuckled, and there was something about his laugh that felt hollow. Fair enough, he said. But you know what? You'll figure it out. Eventually. I didn't want advice. I didn't need a pep talk. But something in his words rang true. I wasn't going to figure this out tonight, but I knew I had to do something. I had already decided that I wasn't going to stay in the same place I had been. Rachel had made her choices, and it was time for me to make mine. I wasn't going to sit here in this bar, wallowing in the past. The past was gone. The only thing left to do was move forward. I left a few minutes later, paid for my drink, and walked back out into the cold night air. My steps were deliberate, my mind clearer now. It was time to face Rachel, but I wasn't going to do it with the same desperation I had before. I was no longer the guy who was waiting for answers. I was the guy who was taking control. When I got back to the apartment, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open without knocking, stepping inside. The place felt different. I could hear the faint sound of Rachel moving around in the bedroom, but she didn't come out to greet me. Part of me wanted to just leave again, walk out the door for good. But no, I had to face this head on. I took a deep breath and called out her name. Rachel. She didn't answer right away. It wasn't like her. Normally, she'd rush out, try to act like everything was fine. But tonight, there was no rush. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. I know what you've been doing, I said, my voice steady. I know about Liam, and I know you're not sorry. She appeared in the doorway, her expression guarded. Adrian, please. No. I interrupted, holding up my hand. You don't get to play the victim here. You've made your choices. Now, I'm making mine. Her eyes flickered with something, fear, guilt, maybe a mix of both. But she didn't say anything. She just stood there, waiting for me to continue. I'm not the guy you want me to be anymore, Rachel, I said slowly, every word weighing heavier than the last. You've lied to me. You've betrayed me. And I'm done. I could see the tears starting to form in her eyes, but I didn't feel the usual pull to comfort her. I wasn't that guy anymore. I wasn't going to fix things for her. This is over, I said quietly, turning away. And I'm done being your backup plan. I walked past her and out the door, leaving the apartment behind. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I wasn't going to be the man I used to be. Not for her, not for anyone. This was my life now, and I was going to live it on my terms. I hadn't expected it to feel so final. The moment I walked out of that door, I knew I wasn't coming back. But the silence that followed my decision, that was deafening. Rachel's tear-filled face, the pleading look in her eyes, the way she reached for me as I left. It stayed with me longer than I expected. And yet, it wasn't regret that I felt. It was relief. It was like I had been holding my breath for months, and now, finally, I could exhale. The following days were a blur. I stayed in a cheap hotel for the first few nights, trying to put some space between me and the life I had just walked away from. The world outside my room felt distant, like I was living in a bubble, cut off from everything I once knew. But even in my isolation, the weight of what had happened kept pressing on me. I hadn't heard from Rachel after that night. At first, I half expected her to call me, maybe text me, try to apologize, or make some desperate attempt to fix things. But the silence continued. The longer it went on, the more I realized that she wasn't the one who was going to fight for this. She wasn't going to be the one to salvage what was left of us. I was the one who had to make the hard decision, and I had made it. For a while, I drowned myself in work, focusing on the things that didn't require emotion. I worked late nights, took on more projects than I could handle, just to keep my mind occupied. But even the constant grind of my professional life couldn't drown out the nagging thoughts. It was impossible to ignore the questions swirling in my head. What went wrong? How did I miss it? Why didn't I see the signs sooner? I replayed everything over and over again, each detail of our relationship spinning in my head like a never-ending movie. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way Rachel had looked at Liam. It all seemed so clear in hindsight, like the pieces of a puzzle that I'd refused to put together before. I had been blind to it. I had wanted to believe that the perfect life we built together wasn't a lie, that our love was real. But it wasn't. It had all been an illusion. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I received a message. At first, I didn't recognize the number, but then I saw the name at the top of the screen. It was Rachel. Adrian, please call me. We need to talk. I sat there, staring at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to shut her out completely and move on. But another part, the part that still cared, even after everything, felt a flicker of curiosity. What did she want now? I thought about it for a long time before I finally decided to call her. There was no way I was going to let her manipulate me again, but I needed closure. I needed to hear her say the things she was too afraid to say before. I dialed her number and waited, each second stretching longer than the last. When she finally picked up, her voice was shaky. Adrian, she whispered. I couldn't tell if it was the sound of guilt or sadness, but I didn't want to waste time on pleasantries. What is it, Rachel? There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to gather her words, trying to find a way to explain herself. But no words came. She started again, but her voice faltered. I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to get this far. I scoffed, unable to keep the bitterness from seeping through my words. Really? Because you've had months to tell me the truth. You've had every opportunity to come clean. But you didn't. You chose to lie. You chose him. And now, you want me to feel sorry for you? I could hear her choking back tears, and for a second, I felt something, a brief flash of sympathy, but it passed as quickly as it had come. Adrian, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know how things got this way. I laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was a laugh filled with bitterness, filled with the pain I had been carrying. Of course you didn't want to hurt me. But you did, Rachel. You did. There was another pause on the line. I could tell she was struggling to find something to say that would fix it, to make everything go back to the way it was. But it couldn't. It wouldn't. I never meant to fall for him, she whispered, barely audible. It just happened. But it wasn't about you. I don't even know how to explain it. I was just confused. Lost, maybe. Lost, I repeated incredulously. You weren't lost, Rachel. You were selfish. You put yourself first, without a single thought about what it would do to me. I know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I know, and I'm so sorry. But please, can't we talk about this in person? I need to explain. I need you to understand. I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. I don't think there's anything you can say that will make this right. She fell silent again, and I could hear the weight of her regret hanging in the air. Please, Adrian. I need you to at least hear me out. I closed my eyes, my hands gripping the edge of the counter as I stood there, fighting the urge to scream, to tell her exactly what I thought of everything. But I didn't. I didn't want to give her that power. I wasn't going to be that man anymore. I'm done, Rachel, I said, my voice steady. I don't need to hear your excuses. I don't need closure from you. What I need is to move on. And I can't do that if I keep letting you drag me back into your lies. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone and dropped it onto the counter, feeling the weight lift off my chest. It was over. No more phone calls. No more late-night apologies. I had made my peace. But even as I stood there, a small voice inside me couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would Rachel just disappear, or would she fight for me? Would she try to fix things, or was this the end for real? I didn't know. And frankly, I didn't care anymore. What mattered now was me. I had lived for her for too long, and now, it was my turn to live for myself. And I wasn't going to waste another second looking back. It had been a week since the phone call, and even though I had told myself I was done, the echoes of that conversation still lingered in my mind. Rachel's voice, trembling with regret, haunted me in the quiet moments, when I was alone, when I had no distractions. But every time I felt that old pull to reach out to her, to check on her, I remembered why I had left in the first place. I spent most of the following days trying to reclaim my life. I focused on work, on friends, on things that mattered to me outside of the woman who had broken my heart. But it wasn't easy. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and erase years of history. No, it's more like trying to untangle a knot that you've been too afraid to confront for years. Every day, I found myself unwinding a little more, feeling the weight of her absence, but also the freedom it gave me. But then, one day, I received a message. It wasn't from Rachel. It was from Liam. The name on my screen sent a wave of fury through me before I even opened the message. I didn't want to read it, didn't want to hear anything he had to say. But the curiosity that had been eating at me for days, the need to know what was happening on his end of things, made me click it anyway. Adrian, we need to talk. Rachel has made a mess of everything, but I'm not your enemy. I just want to clear the air. Let me know when you're free. I stared at the screen, feeling a sharp mix of confusion and anger. What was this? Was this some sort of game to him? The nerve to ask me for a conversation. I had no interest in anything this man had to say. He had crossed a line, and now he was acting like he could just waltz in and fix it. But I couldn't ignore it. I thought about Rachel, how she had apologized, how she had tried to make it seem like it wasn't her fault. Part of me, maybe a smaller, weaker part of me, wanted answers. Maybe Liam had something to say that would change everything. Or maybe this was just one more attempt at control, one more way for her to pull me back into her web. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I let the message sit in my inbox, unanswered, while I sat with my thoughts. I wasn't about to let anyone dictate how this ended. Not Rachel, not Liam. This was my story now, and I would be the one to decide how it unfolded. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea of confronting Liam appealed to me. I wasn't the type of guy who started fights, but something about the way he had inserted himself into my life, into my marriage, irked me. If Rachel wouldn't give me the full picture, maybe he would. And if nothing else, it would give me the closure I was looking for. So, I did something I never thought I would. I responded, "Fine, let's meet. But don't think for a second that I'm interested in hearing your side of the story. This is for me. You're going to tell me everything." I had no idea what kind of man Liam was, but I knew one thing. I wasn't afraid of him. I was tired of being passive. It was time to stand up for myself. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town, a public place where things couldn't get too messy. I spent the night leading up to the meeting trying to prepare myself mentally, rehearsing what I might say, but deep down, I had no idea what to expect. The next morning, I arrived early, needing to clear my head. I sat at a corner table, the warm cup of coffee in front of me, the steam rising up and disappearing into the air. The weight of the situation was heavy, and I could feel my nerves kicking in. What if I was making a mistake? What if this was just more manipulation, more lies? I pushed those thoughts aside. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down now. When Liam walked in, I recognized him immediately. He was tall, well-dressed, exuding that confident aura that seemed to make him impossible to dislike at first glance. He looked calm, almost too calm, like he knew this meeting was going to go in his favor. But there was something behind his eyes, a flicker of tension that betrayed his smooth demeanor. He walked over and sat down across from me, his movements casual, almost too relaxed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just sized each other up, the air between us thick with unspoken words. Finally, Liam broke the silence. "Adrian, thanks for agreeing to meet." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't going to be the one to start the pleasantries. "Let's get one thing straight," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "I'm not here to play nice. I'm not here for some apology or explanation. I want the truth." Liam's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. "Fair enough," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I'll give you the truth, but you need to understand something first. This isn't just about me and Rachel. It's about what happened between all of us and how things got so messed up." I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was already bracing for whatever was about to come out of his mouth. "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold. "I'm listening." Liam took a deep breath, like he was trying to find the right words. "Rachel and I, we never planned for any of this to happen. It wasn't like I set out to come between you two. We were just friends at first. But somewhere along the way, things changed. And honestly, it wasn't just her who got swept up in it. I did too. I didn't know why, but I felt a sharp pang of something. Disappointment, maybe. I had expected him to be more defensive, more self-assured in his role. But instead, he sounded almost like he was regretting it, like he was trying to soften the blow. It was confusing, and it made me angry. "Don't try to make it sound like you're the victim here," I said, my voice harder than before. "You knew what you were doing. You were having an affair with my wife. There's no justification for that." Liam met my gaze, unflinching. "I'm not trying to make excuses, Adrian," he said quietly. "I just want you to understand that Rachel, she was already checking out of your relationship before I even came into the picture. She was lost, confused. And that's what made this so much harder to deal with. She didn't want to hurt you, but she did. And now we're all left with the wreckage." I swallowed, the words hitting harder than I expected. I had known it, deep down, but hearing him say it made it real. Rachel had been slipping away for months, even before Liam came into the picture. She had already checked out. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what Liam had said hung heavy in the air. I had always thought Rachel was the one to blame for what happened, but hearing Liam's side made me realize that there was more to the story. Maybe I had been too blind to see it all along. But no matter what, this wasn't about Rachel anymore. It wasn't even about Liam. It was about me, and the life I was going to rebuild from this moment forward. The coffee shop felt like it was closing in on me. The clinking of cups, the murmur of people around us, it all seemed distant. It felt as if Liam and I were the only ones in the room, the only ones trapped in this strange dance of truth and half-truths. I could feel my pulse quicken as I processed his words, as I began to understand just how much had been hidden from me, just how deep Rachel's lies had gone. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was already emotionally gone long before Liam stepped into the picture. And that realization cut deeper than any betrayal. I wanted to scream, to throw the coffee cup across the room and shatter the whole damn place. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed still, leaning back in my chair, pretending I was calm. My eyes locked onto Liam's. I could feel the weight of my silence pushing against him, forcing him to say more. If he was going to paint himself as the victim, I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Is that it? I asked, my voice low, barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was talking to him or just trying to keep myself from falling apart. You just want me to understand that you two were lost. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Is that supposed to make it okay? Liam shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. I could tell he hadn't expected me to be so calm, so collected. Maybe he thought I'd break down, beg for answers, maybe even ask him to tell me everything. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I had been that guy, once a long time ago. The guy who let people walk all over him because he was too afraid of facing the truth. But now, I was done being weak. Done being a pushover. You don't get it, Liam said, his voice tight with frustration. I'm not here to justify what happened. I'm here to explain, to clear the air. Rachel, she's a mess right now. She's been spiraling for months. I leaned forward slightly, my hands clenched on the table, the heat of the anger simmering just below the surface. You think I don't know that? You think I didn't see the way she was slipping away? You think I didn't feel it? I leaned closer, my voice lowering. You think you're the first guy to make excuses for her? Liam swallowed, and for a moment, I thought he might back off, might even apologize. But instead, he met my gaze, his eyes hardening. I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you how it was. Rachel was emotionally unavailable long before I ever showed up. She was already pulling away from you, Adrian, and you were too blind to see it. The words hit me harder than I thought they would. I had suspected as much, but hearing him say it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. The woman I had loved, the woman I had thought was my partner, was already emotionally checked out. I was the one who had been too caught up in my own world to see it. I wanted to lash out, to throw the table over, to get up and walk away, but I didn't. Instead, I kept my eyes on Liam, my fists gripping the edge of the table as I took a slow breath. And you just went along with it, I said, my voice cold now. You didn't care that she was my wife. You didn't care about what it would do to me. You just took advantage of it. Liam's expression softened for a moment. It wasn't like that, he said, his voice quieter now, almost apologetic. I didn't go into this trying to hurt you, Adrian. But when she started confiding in me, when she started coming to me for comfort, it wasn't something I could just ignore. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to decide whether I believed him. Part of me still wanted to punch him in the face, to make him feel just a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But the other part of me, the part that was trying to move forward, told me this wasn't about him. It was about Rachel. It was about her choices, her actions, and how I had let her drag me through this mess. I straightened up in my chair, my voice steadier than it had been before. I don't need your apology, Liam. What I need is to move on with my life. And the only way I can do that is if I let go of everything. All of it. I paused, letting the words sink in. That includes Rachel. He seemed to hesitate, and for the first time since we'd started this conversation, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You don't mean that, he said, his voice quieter now. You're just angry. You'll calm down. I shook my head slowly. No, Liam. I'm done. I've spent too much of my life trying to fix things that weren't broken in the first place. I wasn't the one who needed fixing. Rachel was. And now, it's her problem, not mine. There was silence between us for a long moment. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt comfortable or mutual. It was thick with unspoken things, with emotions neither of us knew how to address. I was done with Rachel, but I wasn't sure how to let go of the last part of me that still cared. Liam took a deep breath and stood up, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else, plead with me. Maybe, but he didn't. He just nodded. I get it, he said quietly. Good luck, Adrian. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched as he walked away, leaving me sitting there with my thoughts, my anger, my pain. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't peace. It wasn't closure. But it was the beginning of something new. When I walked out of that coffee shop, I didn't feel any lighter. In fact, I felt heavier than I ever had before. But I knew one thing. This was the end. The end of Rachel, the end of Liam, and the end of the life I had been living. I had given so much of myself to a relationship that wasn't real, to a woman who had never truly loved me the way I thought she did. And now, I was going to take it all back. I wasn't going to let anyone else decide my future. I was the one who was in control now. And that was the scariest, most liberating feeling of all. The days that followed that meeting were strange, filled with a kind of emptiness I hadn't expected. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the betrayal, it was the silence. The absence of Rachel's voice, the empty space in my apartment, and the quiet that stretched around me like a thick fog. I spent hours at work, keeping busy, avoiding the moments when I could sit still and think. But eventually, the noise faded. I found that if I allowed myself to sit with the silence, it no longer felt suffocating. It felt like freedom. I didn't reach out to Rachel. I didn't try to explain anything or seek closure. For the first time in a long time, I made the decision to focus on myself, to rediscover who I was without her, without the version of me that had been tangled in her lies. It wasn't easy. Some nights, the pain would creep up again, the old memories would flood in, and I would wonder if I had made the right choice. But then I'd remind myself, I didn't leave for nothing. I left for me. As time went on, I found myself doing things I hadn't done in years. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned, like running and reading, things I used to enjoy but had set aside for the sake of a relationship that now seemed so distant. It felt good to reconnect with those parts of myself, parts one had pushed away for so long. Slowly, I started to feel more like the person I used to be before Rachel had come into my life. And that version of me, he was strong. He was independent. He was ready for whatever came next. One evening, after a long day of work, I decided to take a walk through the park. The air was crisp and the stars were out, twinkling above me like 1,000 little reminders that the world was bigger than my pain. I walked aimlessly, letting my thoughts wander. And then, out of nowhere, I heard a voice. Adrian. I turned, surprised to see a familiar face. It was Eva, a woman I had met a few months earlier at a business conference. We'd exchanged a few casual conversations over drinks, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. She was kind, easy to talk to, and I had always enjoyed her company. But life, as it tends to do, had pulled us in different directions. I didn't expect to see you here, Eva said, her eyes lighting up with a smile that felt warm and genuine. What's going on? I returned the smile, surprised by how easy it felt. Just clearing my head. Taking a walk, you know? She nodded, stepping beside me. I get it. I've been doing the same lately. Life has a way of making you take a step back and reassess things, doesn't it? I chuckled, not expecting the conversation to take this turn, but I liked it. It felt like the universe was nudging me in a different direction, one where things were light, easy, and full of possibility. Yeah, it does. I've been doing a lot of reassessing myself. We walked together, chatting about everything and nothing. Eva had an energy about her that was contagious, no pressure, no expectations. She wasn't trying to fix me, or bring up my past, or make me confront old wounds. She was simply there, enjoying the moment with me, like two people who had just met and were discovering each other for the first time. As the evening wore on, we found a bench near a fountain and sat down, continuing to talk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something. Something new. Something exciting. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. Something I could control, something that was mine. I wasn't trying to replace Rachel. I wasn't trying to rush into anything. I was simply open to the possibility. Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? Eva asked as we stood up to leave. Her tone casual, but there was a glint in her eyes, a playful challenge in the way she asked. I hesitated for just a moment, surprised by how easy it felt to say yes. Yeah, I'd like that, I said, my smile widening. As we exchanged numbers, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Not because I was jumping into a new relationship, but because I was learning how to be open again. I was allowing myself to feel things, to move forward, to take chances. That night, I went home and sat in my apartment, the same apartment that had felt like a prison just a few weeks ago. But now, it felt like mine again. I didn't feel weighed down by the past. Instead, I felt light, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was still healing, still finding my way, but I had learned one crucial thing. I didn't need anyone else to define me. I was complete on my own. The phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Eva. Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m.? My treat. I smiled at the screen, a genuine smile that felt like a promise. Not to anyone else, but to myself. A promise that I was ready to embrace the future. That I was ready for something new. Something better. And that was enough. For the first time in a long time, I could honestly say, I was okay. I was more than okay. I was finally free. And the best part? This was just the beginning.